What's up, everybody? Hello and welcome into another YouTube live show. I am John Kurtz. Today, we got a lot to talk about, man. We got a lot to talk about. Pretty juicy article from Ross Dellenger that came out. It was in regards to Oregon and Washington and the game that they were playing, and a little bit of an oral history of how exactly Oregon and Washington to the Big Ten happened, which gives us some very interesting details on the Pac-12 negotiation at the final hour, how all of that went down, a potential NBC deal that failed. There were a lot of juicy nuggets in there, but perhaps the juiciest for Big 12 fans is going to be two Big 12 teams, at least if we're classifying this as future Big 12 teams, which should give you a hint. One of them was the Four Corners schools, a Four Corner school, made Kevin Warren's extended list of potential expansion targets last year. Now, whether or not that means they would still be on any sort of extended list that Tony Petitti has now that he is the commissioner of the Big Ten, that is certainly up for debate. Not sure about that, but we'll give you those names. This is where I gotta tease you a little bit if you haven't seen the article. I'll give you those names coming up here very shortly. So we have that. We also have a particularly wild weekend in college football, and as it relates to the Big 12, I mean, this conference is just chaotic. Outside of Texas and Oklahoma, which up at the top for right now have pretty firmly entrenched themselves as 1 and 2, it is basically anybody's best guess as to who is the third best team in the league. That was a question I posed on Twitter. I got a bunch of different answers. My favorite answers were those that came in and gleefully said Texas or Oklahoma. I appreciate all of you guys who gave me that answer. But, I mean, you can make a case for a number of teams legitimately as the third best team in the Big 12. Basically like 6 teams maybe. Not sure how all of that is going to play out as we look for somebody to try and upset the apple cart and prevent a Texas and Oklahoma Big 12 championship game, which still does not appear very likely. And I would say appears less likely by the day and less likely by the week, because every week we just see wild results that we don't expect. And I think what we're learning is that there is just so much parity for teams 3 through 14 in this league right now that it's hard to count on anybody to go take care of business in games that you really think they should be taking care of business in. West Virginia, we start talking them up, and I know Mountaineer fans, I saw a lot of this on Twitter, people being frustrated, like, hey, we get this nice national article from Max Olson about how well things have been going and the job that Neil Brown has done. And then we promptly go lose in just devastating fashion on a Hail Mary in one of the wildest innings you'll ever see to Houston. And that's kind of the point. That's very emblematic of what this conference is. TCU looks dead and buried, totally done. And they go with a backup redshirt freshman quarterback who was an Indiana commit before TCU swooped in and took him. And he lights the world on fire with 400 plus passing yards, and TCU just demolishes BYU at home. So it's just really, really difficult to pin down what is going to happen week to week in this league. And I think every team outside of Texas and Oklahoma is just so flawed that they're capable of losing to virtually anybody, particularly on the road. Oklahoma State has resurrected its season. KState has some new juice after finding Avery Johnson, 5 touchdowns in Lubbock. Texas Tech's season appears back now on the downslope after another quarterback injury and the loss that they suffered there, and a continued perplexing refusal to utilize Taj Brooks, who's one of the best players in the conference, as much as they probably should. I feel your pain on that, Red Raider fans, because watching it back, I could not believe that they didn't go to him a little bit more there. Not saying that it was totally the difference between a win and a loss, but if you're going to put yourself in the best position to win, I think Taj Brooks probably deserved the football a little bit more. So that's all on the docket today. That's what I have for you. But you guys know, if you've been here before, you are free to help control the content, much like Browns and Beers has already done here. You can submit a super chat by clicking the $sign below the chat box. That will attach a donation to your chat. It will pin it in a separate column for me, ensures that it gets read here on the chat tonight. We're going to be hopping tonight. We've already got almost 200 people here in the chat, so I can't keep up with everything that's going on there. In order for you to get your voice heard on the chat tonight, click the $sign below the chat box, make it a super chat, attach a donation to your chat. And at the same time, while you control the content and make your voice heard, you're also supporting the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12 content on a week in and week out basis here on this channel. Could not do it without all of your generous support. And I truly, truly do really appreciate each and every one of you who help out that way. And there's a totally free way you can help out the channel as well. That is just to simply like the video. I would much appreciate that. Just one click. Just like the video if you're in here and you haven't. Helps me with that YouTube algorithm. You can also leave a comment in the comment section. That really helps below the video. Whether you agree, disagree with something I say, love me, hate me, it's all gravy to me because that helps with the algorithm. So I would appreciate all of you who do that. And then if you're catching up late on this, you're not watching it live, it's John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo if you'd like to support the channel that way as well. So lots of ways that you can show your support here on the channel tonight. So with that, let's get off and rolling. I feel bad. First thing I look at is I'm getting ready to switch over to my super chat panel here. I just see Fire Kitley out there in the chat. I'm sorry, Tech fans, man. I understand the frustration because I know that's been a frustration this year. I've seen it after a couple of games. Some of my guys, the Gambling Gauchos, tweeting at me that it was a common refrain from like West Virginia fans after the West Virginia game where they were like, why didn't they give the ball to Taj Brooks more? And now you're sitting here getting the same thing from me after losing to KState 38-21. But we'll start with Browns and Beers. I appreciate you being first out of the chute. Thank you for your support of the channel. As always, my friend, really appreciate it. Browns and Beer says, split week for me. Definitely not the way I was expecting between West Virginia and the Browns. But that's life. Going to Orlando for Halloween weekend and the UCF game. If any Knights fans have any suggestions. Hey, I like that. Okay. Give Browns and Beer some suggestions, UCF fans. Let him know what he should be doing in Orlando or around UCF to make the most of his trip to that game. I love that. Help him out. Travel tips. Much appreciated there. Yeah, the Browns, man. Browns took down, that was Brock Purdy, right? I didn't really watch much NFL today, but I did see a little bit of tweeting about that. And yeah, West Virginia, man. I mean, speaking of just, I got a lot of empathy to go around this week in the league, and West Virginia fans would be at the top of my list for that. I mean, to go from the high of completing the insane touchdown pass with 12 seconds left to then getting the unsportsmanlike conduct penalty for taking a helmet off and it leading to a Hail Mary, just a miraculous Hail Mary being completed on the tip drill in the end zone from Donovan Smith. It's brutal, man. It's brutal. You're about to go to 5-1 by winning a game that, you know, the defense did not play very well for. Houston had by far its best second half of Big 12 play, and you were going to survive. That was definitely like a survive in advance kind of road win, and you feel like you really pulled one out of the fire with that late touchdown, and then to have it just taken away. That is tough. That is tough. I will say, and don't hate me for it, but I didn't really expect it to be in this game in particular against Houston, but West Virginia was a team I looked at and I was like, look, they deserve the praise. They deserve the story that got written by them or about them in The Athletic. They deserve the recognition, but I did view them as a team that was too flawed to really run through the rest of this schedule unscathed or relatively unscathed, which I know have been discussed as a possibility. Their schedule looked very manageable on paper to potentially be somebody that could upset the apple cart and make it to Arlington. But I always felt like that was going to be a tough putt just because there were too many flaws, I think, with that team. I still very much appreciate what West Virginia is doing. And I still think they're absolutely going to be a bowl team this year, but that is a tough one to take. And that will be a gut punch to have to rebound from for the Mountaineers. So I apologize, Browns and Beers. I feel for you on that one. I guess I shouldn't apologize. I didn't do anything to you, but I feel for you. I feel for you, my friend. Thank you for being here, and thank you for your support of the channel. All right, Cam, what's up, buddy? So Cam asked, what should the split be between Will Howard and Avery Johnson? This obviously in reference to K-State. Wildcats take down Texas Tech 38-21 in Lubbock behind 5 rushing touchdowns from true freshman quarterback Avery Johnson, 4-star recruit, highest rated quarterback recruit that K-State has had in the program in about 15 years since a guy named Josh Freeman was on campus. And he showed you exactly why. I saw the comparisons, people like Lamar Jackson. I mean, that's kind of what his skill set is like right now. And if you go watch his high school highlights, he can definitely sling the rock, and he still made some really nice throws, particularly the one to Jace Brown late in the game. But right now, so much of his game is just about he is faster than anybody on the field, and he will just you just give him a little sliver, he's going to take off and be in the end zone before you know it. And Texas Tech found that out. I think the biggest play in the game was it's like a 3rd and 10, 3rd, 8 and 9 or 10. And K-State's trailing by 4 in the third quarter. He takes it around for like a 25-yard touchdown and just exploded through a tiny little hole and got into the end zone. So that was the game. From then, K-State gets a pick. Then it turns into another rushing touchdown, and the onslaught was on there at the end of the game. Okay, so how should the reps be split? It's a tricky one. And I know like a lot of K-State fans are going to want to say like, hey, it's just Avery. You got to just hammer him moving forward. I mean, I certainly would prefer that he get the start and try to build a game plan a little bit more tailored around what he can do. But I think they will still probably need Will Howard at times this year, which can get tricky. But it is kind of what college football is turning more and more into. Because of injuries, you're seeing more teams have to utilize multiple quarterbacks to make it through a year. K-State successfully managed it last year to get a Big 12 championship. So, I mean, right now he is very much so outplaying Will Howard. The Will Howard-led offense was not doing much on Saturday. So if it continues like that, you're probably going to have to ride him. But there will be a new element this week of TCU is going to have an entire week to game plan for Avery Johnson, watch the film that is out there on him, and you are going to have more in the passing game from him. Now, the passing game was not doing a whole hell of a lot with Will Howard in the game, and with Avery, you have a much more explosive option on the ground. That much is very true. I guess all that to say, like, I would start Avery, and I would be prepared to potentially play both quarterbacks and utilize their strengths as much as you possibly can. And if Avery takes it and runs with it, then that's great. But I still just think with teams game planning for him, just the ups and downs of being a freshman, there probably will be times where Will Howard is going to be needed as well the rest of the year. And the other thing you have to keep in mind, and I hate to put this out there, but again, like, look at Texas Tech, like quarterbacks are going to get hurt, and you can't, I think the run pass split will have to change a little bit if it's going to be Avery consistently from here on out, or else you do really run the risk of getting him little beat up. So that, I think, is a situation at K-State. I will say, I feel like the ceiling has elevated a little bit on what this team and what this season can be with what Avery Johnson is showing that he is capable of doing. And that to me is about where the significance of the game lies for K-State on Saturday. Not only did you go get a win that sets you up now with 2 home games where you can potentially get to 6-2, but it also just makes you feel better about it. It just added some juice. Like, I think that's the best way I can describe it. It just added some juice to K-State's season. Now you have some excitement, not only for now, but for the future and what this kid is going to be. It's validated what everybody thought about him coming into the program this year. So thrilled about it, man. Thrilled about it. And shout out to the Cats. We're getting that win. Samuel, I appreciate you being here. Thank you, Samuel, for your support. Samuel says, hey, Kurtz, any thoughts on what Baylor should do with Dave Miranda? I love Dave, but on-field performance has been a mess. Thanks, man. Sikkim from Montreal. Ooh, I like that. Montreal. All right. It feels to me like a little too quick on the trigger to fire him, doesn't it? I'm sure that is, I don't know if consensus would be the right way to put it, but I'm sure there is chatter, for instance, on Baylor Twitter about that sort of a thing. I'm pulling up his coaching record here. So 2-7. Then he has the 12-2 Sugar Bowl Big 12 championship year. Last year falls off to 6-7. Now 2-4. And I know things do not appear to be going well. And you could look at it and say, well, hey, 3 or 4 years have not been very good. I would not hold the COVID year against him very much. If it were me, and this, I'm talking not knowing his contract details either. I don't know what the buyout is, how much it would cost you to get rid of him. So, if somebody does have that info, certainly let me know. It feels a little too swift for me, but I'm a guy who's inclined to like Dave Miranda and really respects the Baylor program. So based on my gut, I would think give him 1 more year, but I understand why you'd be very, very tepid about doing that right now. So, and I'm also not I'm not a fan. I'm not emotionally invested in this. So I will fully grant you that I'm going to have a much different perspective than somebody like you would be. And, let's see how the rest of the year finishes out. I know Baylor's in a different scenario than what TCU was this weekend, but I had pretty much counted TCU out for the rest of the year and thought they were going to be down and out, scuffling, down a quarterback, and all of a sudden they throw out there their best effort of the season in whitewashing BYU. So, let's see what happens the rest of the year. But I know that patience is not anything that anybody really wants to hear right now. And certainly, Miranda has absolutely struggled. There's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. I'm trying to check the chat here to see if anybody has the buyout info on Miranda. But anyway, if you guys want to be a part of the show, remember, click the $ below the chat box. That is how you can attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat. It will pin it in a separate column for me and ensures that you make it on the show tonight and get your opinion out there. Plus, it's supporting the work that I do to bring you Big 12 conference realignment content on a weekly basis here on the channel. Speaking of, I do want to touch on this realignment-based story that was the tease to the video here, which is about two Big 12 schools, at least when we're talking about the 2024 and beyond Big 12. Two Big 12 schools making it on Kevin Warren's extended Big 10 expansion list from last year. There are going to be some caveats to this. One, it was a pretty long list, and some of the other names that are on there are not that impressive, but it's interesting nonetheless, and it comes from a Ross Dellenger story that's also littered with a bunch of other little nuggets that are fun relating back to the Pac-12 v. Big 12 saga and Oregon, Washington to the Big 10. So the story is all based around the fact that obviously Oregon and Washington played just a classic of a game this weekend, but it's set in that context. And so here's a quote. I'm going to begin with a quote from the Washington Board of Regents chair, David Zeke. He said, quote, "It was both of us or none of us. The consensus was that if Oregon came along, we'd do it." The article says, in a fascinating wrinkle, the two programs needed one another for their realignment shift, but during a wild 3-day stretch in early August, they weren't always on the same page. One day Oregon was in and Washington was out. Another day Oregon was out and Washington was in. Like a romantic couple unwittingly thrust together by external forces, they twisted the night away, moving from one dance floor to another. Pac-12, Big 10, Pac-12, Big 10. So really underscoring there that there was a lot of changing of thought as to what was going to happen from both sides of the equation on this. And it was not maybe as cut and dried as some would have thought from the outside, as far as what it was that they were going to do. Quote, "It was on and off at different degrees," said an industry source with knowledge of the negotiations. Every hour it changed. Now we're down to every hour it changed. It does give, I would say, a little bit more validity to the side of reporting that was saying like, hey, this was pretty much signed, sealed, and delivered. That was it Thursday night into Friday, I think, Thursday night, that Oregon and Washington were going to sign on and just take the Pac-12 deal. And then Friday, things changed in an instant. We have an industry source here, according to Ross Dellenger, who said every hour it changed. In August of 2020 or of 2022, August of 22, okay, 1 month after UCLA and USC news emerged that they were headed to the Big Ten, Washington and Oregon each sent the Big Ten HQ a 40-plus page slide presentation in an attempt to convince the league to acquire them. Yahoo Sports obtained both slideshows. I thought that was a pretty interesting detail there from Ross Dellenger. He was able to get slideshows of these two schools trying to make their case for the Big Ten, and he actually showed a screenshot of the first slide of both of them. No shade to anybody who's putting these together, and I don't think slideshow aesthetics are going to be paramount to whether or not you're getting into the Big Ten, but I did feel like the slideshow aesthetics could have been a little bit better. You know, I don't know who's making these for Washington and Oregon, but I was a bit underwhelmed by the aesthetics of the slideshow. That's just a side note there. Anyway, here's the part that is going to pertain more to the Big 12. Okay, so within the Big Ten office last summer, then Commissioner Kevin Warren led an expansion exploration that spanned more than a dozen schools, many of whom reached out to the league about an acquisition after the LA schools joined. Conference administrators created a list of desired programs thought to be attainable, according to multiple sources who have seen the list. Now, what is funny about that is the first school that I'm going to read off to you here is Notre Dame, and we could certainly have a debate on whether or not that is actually attainable for the Big Ten, if at any point in time that would happen. But we have a list here of, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So it's actually a 12-team list. It was 10 teams plus Oregon and Washington. So a 12-team list here, basically schools that the Big Ten went through and vetted because they thought, under Kevin Warren, again, who was very expansion crazed, this is the guy that was really driving the bus on this, wanted to be very expansion-minded, expansion-oriented. He is not there anymore, and he rubbed a lot of people the wrong way because of his attitude. So I would caution people to take this with perhaps a grain of salt because of that. But here's the list. Notre Dame, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State. Nothing surprising so far, right? Well, how about this one? Pitt. Pitt was on that list. And then Kansas, Cal, Stanford, Virginia, and Arizona which was another kind of out of left field one for me there. So Kansas and Arizona being the two Big 12 schools there, Big 12 2024 and moving forward, that made Kevin Warren's expansion list there. Kansas, we've heard about. I mean, obviously, Kansas for a long time has been trying to flirt with the Big Ten, putting themselves out there. As you know, any athletic director worth their salt would be doing in their position. They have a behemoth of a basketball program. They are an AAU school, which we know the Big Ten likes. But again, they're on this same list that is 12 teams deep that also includes Pitt. And, so that the Pitt thing really kind of maybe do a double take, like, all right, like how legit is this? And it's such a wide reaching list, but we've seen reported lists that included like TCU, and I had never seen Arizona before. So you get a smattering of different teams here, but Dellenger's a pretty legitimate reporter right now. So I trust this list quite a bit, that these would be teams legitimately on here, and Kansas will always be on like the fringes of that discussion with the Big Ten. But I think the problem here for that would be, I mean, if you are a Kansas fan really hoping for that, you're looking up at this like, all right, so like Notre Dame, I would agree, is seemingly unlikely here unless something significant changes. But man, I mean, North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, those are schools that we feel like the ACC is going to implode at some point in time. I'd be shocked and then throw in Virginia too. So North Carolina, Clemson, Florida State, Virginia. I'd be shocked if some combo of those schools aren't headed there. You're probably having to get to pretty deep into that list if you're going to be included. And at the same time, this was Kevin Warren's list, a guy who was very, very expansion crazed. So Oregon, Washington, Cal, Stanford, those are 4 teams on the list. You can cross those off. So I guess that would be a fair point to make. Notre Dame, probably not happening right now. So then you're down to a list of 7. But man, like Arizona really raises an eyebrow for me. And that makes me wonder, like, is this about basketball that Kevin Warren kind of had like I don't know if it's fair to say like a basketball wing of the discussion here, but like hey, here are 2 premier basketball programs that we could add. Arizona, certainly in terms of like population base, is a place that is getting bigger and bigger. It is in a different time zone. It is in a different part of the country. If you're trying to move out that way. So I can see some of the advantages there. And one other thing I will point out that I think is interesting to monitor as we go through the future of this conference is like, if Brett Yormark is correct, that basketball really has a lot more value than what most people are seeing right now, and the Big 12 is able to make a bunch more money by decoupling at the next TV deal, like on down the road, I guess my point would be, do other conferences look at it and say, hey, actually, this Brett Yormark guy was right. There's more value in basketball than what we were giving this credit for. Maybe we should invest more heavily in bigger basketball programs if we feel like TV networks would actually pay for them, because they're seeing now with what the Big 12 has done, the precedent the Big 12 has set, that there is more actually there. So maybe that is the best route for a Kansas or an Arizona to eventually get to that point in the Big 10. But that was a pretty juicy nugget, I think, for fans of this channel to see there. And here is a quote from a conference official who wished to remain anonymous. He said, quote, "We had this list of schools and went through it with the chancellors and presidents. Kevin wanted them, Oregon and Washington, to come in with USC and UCLA, but for whatever reason, the LA schools didn't want to create a West Coast pod. He wasn't able to convince them." A year later, after that wild 3-day stretch in August, the $60 million commitment from Fox and at least a few angry Big Ten administrators who were vehemently against expansion, the Ducks and the Huskies were in. Where's the part? It did outline who some of the schools were that really did not like the idea of expanding more. Here's a quote from a Big Ten administrator again. Says, quote, "We were done expanding. Tony thought it was done too. We'd walked away from Oregon and Washington the previous year. We were done. But of course, all of that changed." We got so many like anonymous quotes from the John Canzano side of things. George is really kicking ass this week. Here is a great quote in the same vein from the other side, coming from Ross Dellenger here. It says, during that August 1st meeting, this is talking about a meeting regarding the Pac-12 media deal. Athletic directors and presidents learned the details of the Apple deal, all of which failed to live up to expectations. And here is your money quote. One Pac-12 administrator described it thusly, quote, "It was bleep." 4-letter word that starts with S. I'm trying not to get censored by YouTube here, but it was bleep. That's what one Pac-12 administrator described the Apple deal as, which, of course, was at least $7 million per year under promised, with about a $23 million guarantee every single year. And the article says it was a massive disappointment given the long journey here. Kliavkoff occasionally updated presidents, not athletic directors, though, during board meetings. Presentations were made using text-heavy slide decks listing potential suitors, but almost never revealing figures, aside from Kliavkoff's months-long contention that any Pac-12 deal would be better than their Big 12 rivals. So basically, it sounds like the word that Kliavkoff was given to his own university presidents is basically what we kept being fed and hearing from Pac-12 media sources, like, no, we don't really have any specifics. We don't have specific networks or figures or whatever, but it's layup to beat the Big 12 deal. I mean, it seems like what was going on internally was basically what was being reflected externally in all of this, which probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise now that we've had the dust settle on all of this and George Kliavkoff and company throughout that entire process. Through the months, Kliavkoff juggled conversations with a host of networks. This is also pretty interesting. CBS wanted a small piece of basketball games. Talks with Amazon never really materialized because the streamer wanted exclusive rights to all games for a paltry fee. So they wanted it on the cheap. Amazon wanted all the games and they wanted them on the cheap. Fox and ESPN were open to a small piece of the package. We heard that quite a bit throughout the process. But together, they were not near enough to get to the Big 12's number. There were even talks with the CW. Hey, all right, all of our One Tree Hill and Gossip Girl jokes and Gilmore Girls jokes apparently were legit. There were even talks with the CW, which ultimately struck a sub-licensing agreement with ESPN to televise ACC games this season. And then there was NBC, and this is the most compelling part of all of this. The Pac-12 entered deep enough negotiations that NBC and USA Network were presented as legitimate places for the Pac-12's A package of football games. So you could have had the best games being on NBC and or USA Network. And then during a meeting in late spring or early summer, the bad news arrived. And quote, "Hey guys, NBC is out," one person says, describing the meeting. So they had NBC on the line, NBC and USA Network, and then poof, it was gone, says a person who had knowledge of the call. The presidents had to be leaving these meetings going, what the F is going on? The league lost all credibility. Schools lost faith. I mean, it's just funny to look at this all in retrospect. Like, so much of it played out like we all were contending that it likely was behind the scenes. And the leaks about all these networks, like we heard about the CW, we heard about USA, we heard about NBC, and then stuff would fall through. And so it was like, you heard about these networks and then nothing tangible was there. Nothing tangible was there. There was no update. And meanwhile, behind the scenes, things were just kind of falling apart and deals going by the wayside. And yet, there's still more here in this article. There was still a chance for the Pac-12 to be salvaged. In fact, Oregon mega booster Phil Knight supported the streaming deal, maybe not the distribution amount, but the concept at least. Another thing that we had seen reported before, like Phil Knight actually could have been convinced to be on board with what the Apple deal was. The Apple deal was presented August 1st. On August 2nd and 3rd, presidential calls went rather smoothly. Washington President Anna Marie Koss, who was chair of the board, and Oregon President John Carl Schultz, on the job for 4 months, expressed an intent to remain in the conference and sign the agreement at a meeting scheduled for Friday morning, August 4th. However, while leaders discussed with Pac-12 colleagues the nature of the Apple deal, they were negotiating with the Big Ten as well. On August 2nd, the jig was up. In a story broken by Yahoo Sports, Big Ten presidents were mobilizing to formally invite the two schools. Okay, here's the nugget about the schools that were against expansion in the Big Ten. So Ohio State, Michigan, and especially Penn State were at first against more expansion. Though they eventually voted for the move, leaders in State College expressed disappointment to the point that one administrator described their feelings on adding Oregon and Washington as no effing way. A lot of very colorful language here. Pac-12, could we keep it PG, please? Could we keep it PG? There's a lot of language here in this story. Penn State makes me laugh because, I mean, is the thought here for Penn State like, man, we've been getting by for years on this schedule where, you know, we'll play like Ohio State or Michigan and then all the bottom dwellers of the Big Ten and, you know, nobody's in the non-con and we'll roll up 9-win seasons by beating nobody of substance and just keep our program more relevant than it should be because of that. And now they're fearful of it going away if you've got a full-on West Coast operation with USC, UCLA, Oregon, and Washington. That was my first thought there with Penn State. I would still tell you, I think Penn State this year is overrated, being where they're at in the top 10 right now. I digress. Just a little bit more for you here to finish things off. At the time, it was unclear that Oregon and Washington were in agreement on the Big Ten's latest expansion offer. There is conflicting information on what happened next. Big Ten admins went to bed Thursday thinking the deal was dead, having received word that cost was ultimately against the move to the Big Ten. Quote, overnight, she flipped. That's what happened, said one person with knowledge of the talks. Others say Oregon resisted on agreeing until late, possibly to leverage a better Big Ten offer. We were anxious about the terms of the deal, Zeke said. Was it enough? So one line of thinking would be Washington was who really flipped. The other would be that Oregon was trying to hold out and Oregon decided to flip at the last minute. Either way, it did happen at the last minute. The rest is history. We know how all of this worked out, and that we now have 4 corner schools in the Big 12, and the Pac-12 is, in essence, no more. But a lot of really good reporting there and some good details from Ross Dellenger. I was like, could we have gotten some of those sooner? I get that it works well for him to drop it in a story on the doorstep of Oregon and Washington, and it's very well done. Very well done with the story there. I'd encourage you to go read it all because I just pulled some highlights for you from the story. But appreciate that from Ross Dellenger. And now let's hop back into some of your super chats. Appreciate all of you guys who have done that already. If you want to be a part of the show tonight, almost 350 people in here. I can't keep up with the chat. Too much going on. If you want to be a part of the show, click the $ below the chat box. You can attach a donation to your chat, make it a super chat. It will pin it in a separate column for me and ensures that you make it on the show here tonight. As always, it is much, much, much appreciated. I would also appreciate it if you could like the video. That is a totally free way to support the channel. Just one click, all it takes, and leave a comment in the comment section during or after, agree or disagree. All of that stuff does help me out. John-Kurtz-4 on Venmo as well if you want to contribute there, if you are not able to catch this as we are going live. But Daniel is, and thank you, Daniel, for your support as always. I appreciate you, my friend. Cat fan in Huskerland, a.k.a. Daniel Osborne. I am so pleased with the Cats this week. Avery Johnson looks so good. 5 rushing TDs. Wow. Go Cats. Hey, I share those thoughts. The 5 rushing touchdowns were the most by a K-State Wildcat since Colin Klein, his offensive coordinator, did it in 2011 in I believe it was a 4 overtime win against Texas A&M. Shout out to the Aggies, who have to be feeling really great about Jimbo's contract right about now after another loss in a big game and scuffling as a 500-ish program in the SEC. So my congrats, my sincere, heartfelt congrats to Texas A&M. But yeah, it was awesome, Daniel. It was awesome. And now K-State's back home. Before this week, I was thinking, hey, these are 2 pretty darn manageable home games with TCU and Houston back-to-back. And then both TCU and Houston win on Saturday, and TCU in dominant fashion over BYU. And now I'm rethinking that a little bit and looking around the league like, hey, basically anybody is capable of beating anybody on any given week. So it's hard to count anything, really take it for granted week to week in the Big 12. But Avery Johnson certainly has injected some life into this season that was much, much needed for the Wildcats. So appreciate you, Daniel. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your support as always. And I hope you have a great night, my friend. David, what's up, David? David Z, appreciate your support, man. David says, Houston fan base not Big 12 ready. Stadium looked pathetic on TV and tickets going for $1. Much respect for your work. Go Cyclones ISU. Well, congrats to your clones, David. Made pretty easy work of Cincinnati in a 30-10 victory over there, which, I would have that was the weirdest line of the week to me, that Cincinnati was a 5-point favorite. And when I see those, I typically lean into them. So if you guys listen to my podcast, the 3-Mile podcast, I had Cincy -5 as my pick that week because I thought that line seems so weird and so off from Vegas that they have to know something. That's typically my strategy there. Seek out the weirdest line that seems to make the least amount of sense and be like, hey, clearly people in Vegas know something here. So I did that with this game, and it played out almost exactly like I would have anticipated it playing out. Iowa State controlling the game. Matt Campbell, if you want a Matt Campbell take, David, I will get to your Houston take in just a moment. But I did want to get this out there because my big Iowa State take, based on the way their season is going right now, one of only 2 teams with 3 league wins at 3-1. I think Matt Campbell has a pretty high floor, particularly by like Iowa State football standards. I think he's got a very high floor. And I think we probably all should have been intelligent enough to realize that. Last year gave you some pause, being that it was just a 4-win season. Iowa State has already matched that win total, by the way, this year. That I can understand why that gave people some pause combined with the gambling thing. But he is the type of guy that's like, he's a good enough coach. He's going to be able to elevate a roster that looks like it doesn't have enough talent to be really fiercely competitive in the league. What I don't think he has is like this top end ability that everybody was looking at after the 2020 season, and thinking that he was going to be somebody that could be, competing for the Big 12 like year in and year out. I view him as a lower ceiling but high floor sort of a guy in Ames, and I think that's what we're seeing here and what is really coming out with this season. Now, I understand if you're an Iowa State fan, you look at that and say, hey, this roster's really young, quarterback's young, and the way things are humming right now, let's see where this thing can go. Maybe it's another Brock Purdy, Breece Hall that can lead you to the couple of years that they had. Maybe so. I would also just say, if you look at what they're doing in the NFL, like those guys were really, really good. And I don't know that I'm seeing Brock Purdy and Breece Hall on this Iowa State roster for right now. But Iowa State should be happy as hell with this season. And Matt Campbell is doing a tremendous job. I did see some, should Matt Campbell be Big 12 Coach of the Year discussion pop up on Twitter. And I was like, all right, we should probably slow our roll a little bit on that, because I would have both Venables and Sark ahead of him in the pecking order for that. But he's done a great job. He's done a great job this year under unique circumstances that nobody else in the league has had to deal with, namely the gambling issues and the fallout there. As far as Houston goes, there's not much escaping this. It's bad. Like, I get it's a Thursday night. I get that Houston has not been a football powerhouse here, but there should be some excitement about being in the Big 12. You're playing a standalone Thursday night home game against a team that was 4-1 in the league coming in. And man, attendance was really, really bad. I saw some of the chatter on Twitter about how rough of an area it is and not wanting to hang out. You got to do better than that, Houston. They've talked a big game about making a commitment, and they have financially done a pretty good job of making commitments to upping their game in the Big 12, but you got to start getting some fans out there somehow, some way. I also realized the product on the field had not been great through Big 12 play so far this year, but boy, it does not look good. Yeah, there's no hiding it. It does not look good. And frankly, the way that the 4 incoming schools are performing right now is not a great reflection on the rest of the future of the league. Now, I don't think it's like a major deal. And I expected that there would be bumps in the road, a learning curve, so to speak, for the new teams coming in. But the only win that any newcomer has over part of the old guard in the Big 12 is that win that Houston got on a Hail Mary. Like, it took a Hail Mary and one of the most miraculous innings you'll ever see in a college football game to get a team a win like that. The only other one is BYU over Cincy. I did not anticipate that it would be this bad. And to me, it underscores, again, the importance of getting the 4 corner schools and bringing in like a Utah. And by the way, Arizona looks phenomenal. Like, they're really on the come up with Jed Fish right now. Tremendous game on Saturday against Washington State. But it makes you feel a lot better about having that juice. And then, of course, whatever Colorado and Coach Prime are going to be, because that was an impressive as hell performance, because it is impressive to blow a 29-point lead. And Colorado accomplished that with Coach Prime on Friday. But that juice is going to be, I think, needed here with these 4 schools to help kind of prop the league up. Well, the 4 schools get acclimated here, but it was just another rough week for that, man. Cincinnati got thumped at home by Iowa State, a team that most people had down in the bottom 2 or 3 of the league heading into the year, and faced all that adversity. And that's kind of a sign of like, hey, it's a different deal playing in the Big 12. Like, you could be pretty down on Iowa State and down on that roster, but they're still able to go into Cincy and win by 20. With all of that going on. And TCU has had a really rough year, and lots of calls, for Kendall Briles' head after what the offense had been for a couple of weeks, and Chandler Morris kind of struggling. And then they go out there with a redshirt freshman quarterback who was an Indiana commit before TCU offered, and they light the world on fire and drill BYU. So I just underscoring how rough life is trying to get acclimated to a new conference here, and how different it is than playing in the AAC, or obviously in BYU's case, an independent sort of schedule. So anyway, David, you gave me a nice launching point there for a lot of those takes to get off my chest. So I appreciate you. Congrats to your clones, and thank you for being here tonight on the channel. Slap Happy. Thank you, Slap Happy, for your support. I appreciate the Hammerhead picture that we got going on there. Nice Hammerhead shark. I'm always here for that. Always here for that. I'm also always here for our web, getting a little shot in, a little quip at the Pac-12 with that story that we just heard. Layups and dominoes, bro. Hashtag Big 12 Karen. Yes, it has been a minute since we've gotten to use the layups and dominoes line there. And that, again, back to how things are being portrayed publicly by those that were reporting on the situation. Like, oh, it's a layup that will beat the Big 12 deal. There's dominoes falling all over the place. Those are the references there that our web is making. But I mean, the more that you read, it just seems like George Kliavkoff seems like a guy who was just in over his head, and he's not the only one to blame. A lot of leadership issues that preceded him by years laid the groundwork for all of this to fail the way that it did so spectacularly, but he certainly played a large role as well. So, and speaking of Karen, all hail Lord Karen. All hail Lord Karen. It's been a minute. We need to pay our respects to our Lord and Savior, Big 12 Karen. So thank you. Thank you for the checks. Thank you for the checks, Karen, and this lovely new house that I have. Thanks to you. Alan, what's up, Alan? Alan, I appreciate you and your support as always. Alan says, congrats on the K-State win against Texas Tech. Hate the loss to Oklahoma State. Wonder if Jalen Daniels will come back. KU better off in the Big 12, not the Big 10. We are a better conference. In your mark, we trust. Rock Chalk Jayhawk Allen. Alan, you might be my favorite Kansas fan in the world, man. I appreciate you a lot. That Oklahoma State game was brutal if you're a Kansas fan, because I felt like, and I say this at the risk of making Oklahoma State fans mad, but I felt like Kansas outplayed Oklahoma State in that game. And it was just KU shot themselves in the foot too many times down the stretch. I mean, the offense completely fell off a cliff after Jason Bean was just demolishing Oklahoma State, demolishing them. The offense finished like a couple of turnover on downs. I mean, the last 4 drives were awful for Kansas there, right down to the turnover on downs at the end of the game where the pass gets batted down on 4th and short. And look, give Oklahoma State all sorts of credit. I mean, I'm not trying to take anything at all away from Mike Gundy, because I think the real headline from that game is stop counting Mike Gundy out. And I'm talking to myself as much as anybody else there. I mean, big picture problems. And I still think like he's still like is begrudgingly coming around to like NIL. He had that quote from like his coach's show where he's like, yeah, we need to donate to NIL. I'm not sure that I totally like agree with the state of affairs and all that, but like, yes, we need to donate to NIL. It's like, Gundy, can you just swallow your pride and just stop saying that and just say, hey, support the players, use NIL. But regardless of whatever your issues are with him and how messy things have looked, they have turned the season around by beating quite possibly 2 of the top 5 teams of the Big 12 in KU and K-State. I mean, those were really nice wins. And he absolutely punked K-State. It took a heck of an effort to squeak by Kansas, but that is impressive, man. And Oklahoma State has new juice. They finally picked a quarterback and stuck with it. I do wonder if Gundy would have just rolled with Alan Bowman the entire year and let him work through some of the issues a little bit more, how different things might be for Oklahoma State. But they're looking pretty good. Ollie Gordon looks like a stud, like a total star, and they're really rolling. Gundy is it's kind of like with Matt Campbell, where it's like, hey, we probably counted him out too much and should have realized that he's got a floor that's pretty high. And it's like Mike Gundy. We probably shouldn't have counted him out as much as we did, because regardless of what you think roster issues might be or what the future is going to be in talent acquisition, the guy knows ball and the guy can coach him up on a week-to-week basis. And he is definitely found a way to do that. I mean, it's just a perfect encapsulation of the Undertaker meme where he's in the casket, you've counted him out for dead, and then it flies open and he shoots up and is staring right at you. And that's Mike Gundy right now with what he has done. So Kansas is a tough one to figure out, because eye test wise, like if I'm just looking at these teams and what I've seen so far this year, if I'm talking about like, hey, who is the 3rd best team in the league? I feel like the eye test tells me that Kansas has as strong a case as anybody, but you don't really know what's going on with the quarterback situation. And Jason Bean's, I think you've kind of got this pegged down, right? Like Jason Bean for 3 quarters is a really, really good quarterback, but it seems like his deal is he's always really struggled when it comes down to crunch time. And when you need to make a play late, when things are going wrong, you need like a stopper. he's not able to do that. And that's the thing that evades him. And Jalen Daniels, I think, has a knack for being able to make that sort of play. But Jalen Daniels can't stay healthy and is you're never able to rely on him being out there. I guess the positive for Kansas fans is that he did actually travel and was on the bench, which was different than the previous 2 games. But I don't know what you can count on getting out of him the rest of the year. And Bean is going to be good enough to get you close to the finish line, but can he cross the finish line in some of these really tightly contested games, especially on the road in tough places to play like Stillwater? So Kansas feels really close to being definitively the 3rd best team in the league to me, but they're faltering just enough, and you don't know what exactly is going to go on a quarterback the rest of the year. So it's a tough one to decipher. But I mean, rest assured, I mean, Kansas is still a pretty good team, and I still think KU's probably 8-4 at worst on the season here. So to me, they still have a pretty strong case as far as 3rd best in the Big 12 goes. And with Oklahoma State, is it a little bit hard to say, like, hey, they're the 3rd best team in the league when they've got a 20-plus point loss at home to South Alabama on the resume? I mean, it sure is, but the way that they have played the last 2 weeks, they've played as well as anybody in the league. So there's that. I think K-State, if we're just going to have this discussion right now, like, K-State obviously had the preseason expectations. Avery Johnson gives them a different element, different dimension, and K-State has 2 double-digit wins over UCF and then at Texas Tech. So they've finished pretty strongly in those games, but I'm still seeing enough flaws there and have enough concerns about where all of this is going. They're kind of beat up on defense. Offense has had some level of inconsistency, and you're still going to have to get a little bit more out of your passing game than you are right now. So it's hard for me to feel confident about saying that they're the 3rd best in the league right now. I mean, you can just keep going on and on down the list, and it becomes really complex. Joe, what's up, Joe? Joe says, thank you for your support, by the way, Joe. Joe says, well, it looks like KState, TCU, and Iowa State have righted the ship. Nice wins for all 3 this week. Yes, that was, I think in all of those cases, these have been a week or a couple of weeks to right the ship. Obviously, a week for K-State and TCU, which also adds a little bit more juice to that matchup this week in Manhattan. Big 12 championship game rematch. All of a sudden, both teams following kind of a similar storyline with young freshman quarterbacks being thrown into action. And all of a sudden, those guys have given new life. They breathe new life into their teams and their seasons. The TCU thing, did not see that coming at all. And I realize what I'm about to say. You could say the same thing about K-State based on the way the last 2 years have gone. But I have to ask, like, is Sonny Dykes just like starting Chandler Morris every year on purpose to like motivate a backup quarterback? Is this some type of bit? Is it some type of gimmick? Because like Josh Hoover went 37 of 58 for 439 yards and 4 touchdowns as a redshirt freshman. And that is something that, I mean, I have not seen Chandler Morris look that dynamic anytime that I've ever seen him. I mean, to be honest, and I don't mean to rip the kid too much, but he's just not done a whole lot for me every time I've seen him play. And last year you had a Heisman finalist sitting behind him who took you to the national championship game. This year, guy gets his first crack and goes for 400 plus and 4 touchdowns. Not without some mistakes. There were 2 interceptions and, it was not perfect, but it was a guy that they trusted in Hoover enough to throw the ball 58 times with Chandler Morris out of the game. And it worked really, really well. So I don't know. I don't know what it makes me think of Sonny Dykes. He's tried to start Chandler Morris twice in a row with performances like that behind him. And we'll see if Hoover can keep it going. I realize it's 1 game for a redshirt freshman there, but certainly an observation that you have to take from that. And for K-State, last year was, you start Adrian Martinez. The offense was really scuffling until Will Howard came in because of injury and then lit the world on fire in the back half of the season and wins a Big 12 championship. So you've got 2 teams and programs here that have remarkably similar-ish storylines to how their seasons have gone each of the last 2 years. So it'll be an intriguing one coming up on Saturday. But Joe, appreciate the congratulations. Thank you for your support of the channel. And thank you for being here tonight. Delrick. Okay, Delrick says Dave Miranda's contract guaranteed until 31. Buyout $84 million for Dave Miranda's contract. Oh boy. All right. I don't know. Baylor, is there a T-Boone Pickens out there that's going to foot the bill for that? That is crazy. That is crazy. Boy, 31 buyout of $84 million. I assume a lot of that came from from an extension after the Big 12 championship year. Yeah, I mean, I think that further accentuates my point for whoever it was that asked. I apologize. I'm not remembering your name right now. I can go back up and look at it. Should be smart about that. Samuel, my guy Samuel, who asked about that. Further accentuates my position. Like, I think you probably have to roll with it at least for another year right now, based on how that's going. My body is a gulag. What's up? My body is a gulag. Notre Dame sure broke through the Trojans. Another shocking effort, and one that does have Big 12 implications here, because, I don't know how many Oklahoma fans are still hanging out around here, but I know it's been a joyous weekend for Sooner fans, getting the week off to bask in the glow of their win over Texas, watching Lincoln Riley's defense get shredded by what had been an anemic Notre Dame offense the last few weeks, watching Caleb Williams melt down and throw 3 interceptions. That had to be incredibly cathartic for Oklahoma fans. So congratulations on that. We were debating this the other day. This will really make Oklahoma fans mad. We were debating this the other day on the 3-Mile podcast. I think I framed it as who will win a national championship first, Lincoln Riley, Brent Venables, or neither. The consensus was probably neither, but I said I still think Lincoln Riley has a better shot to do it, because I think Lincoln Riley will always be able to attract elite quarterbacks, and at some point he's got to stumble into a defensive coordinator who can put together an average defense, right? Whereas Brent it's hard to. This is the worst time to be like criticizing Brent Venables, because he's what he's done so far this year. But I'm still a little bit leery of Oklahoma, not only the rest of the year, but just in general as a program heading into the SEC. But he's done a phenomenal job so far this year, and has proven me wrong to this point in the season. So we shall see. But I would still, gun to my head, I would still put money on Lincoln Riley having a better shot to do that than Venables. But Oklahoma fans have taken a lot of crap over the last few years for the way that worked out, especially last year, the way things looked. So they deserve this moment. They deserve this moment to bask in it a little bit. Ryan, what's up, Ryan? Ryan, I appreciate you. Thank you for being here. Ryan says, BYU only school fan, ready for Big 12. Need a new O-line coach. I'm doubtful about being bowl eligible, but hopefully we can get 2 more wins. Let's go look at the BYU schedule. BYU is 4-2. They are 1-2 in the Big 12. They're hosting Tech. That will be an interesting game this weekend, because part of it is like quarterback health. It was kind of an interesting deal with Baron Morton. It sounded like he was beat up coming into the game. He took a lot of shots in the first half. KState really came after him and pressured him. And he was still playing the entire first half, and then just didn't come out in the second half when Tech went to the backup. Or third stringer. So I don't know what the prognosis is going to be on Morton. And even if he plays, like, how healthy is he able to be? The key really is like Tech needs him to at least be out there and be able to be kind of a game manager. And then just they've got to make a commitment to get the ball more to Taj Brooks. He needs to just be a complete and total workhorse for that offense. He's too good to not be. So, I mean, that's winnable. It's winnable on Saturday based on Texas Tech's current condition. Then you've got at Texas. I mean, that will be very tough. Oklahoma is still left on the schedule. You've got to go to Stillwater. That's really tough. Iowa State at home is looking pretty tough. At West Virginia, I mean, that's pretty tough. So yeah, I'm with you. This is if BYU is going bowling, this is a pretty important game on Saturday against Tech. You're going to need to get that one, and then hope you find one somewhere between at Texas, at West Virginia, at Oklahoma State, and then Iowa State and Oklahoma at home. You're right. That's a pretty daunting back half of the schedule for BYU. And I think right now that would be the way I would look at it. Like, find a way to get to a bowl game if you're BYU right now. So feel your pain, Ryan. That was a rough one on Saturday, but I appreciate you being here, and thank you for your support of the channel. Our web says the 23 newbies don't have Power 5 depth yet. They were always going to have a tough transition. You get to see Colorado State Hail Mary last night. I didn't see it live, but I saw the highlights of it. There were two of the wildest games you'll ever see, man, between Colorado State and Boise, and then obviously Houston, West Virginia that we just talked about. I kind of want to go pull that game up. I know it's not a Big 12 game, but that was an insane comeback the way that happened too. So that would be, what are we looking at? Mountain West, Colorado State and Boise. I was going to look at what the score was with like 5 minutes left in that game, because it was nuts. So Boise scores with 6 minutes and 12 seconds left to go up 30-10 on Colorado State. 6 minutes and 12 seconds left. Colorado State then gets a touchdown pass 2 minutes later. Just over 2 minutes later, they get another touchdown pass, and then they get the play at the end of the game, the 33-yard pass as time expired to win that game. Yes, that was also insane. And you're correct. On the Power 5 depth thing, you're totally correct. That's why we see, like, Houston had been the most glaring example up until that game on Thursday against West Virginia, where they were just plummeting in the second half of games. The West Virginia game was the first time they had scored a touchdown in the second half of a Big 12 game this year. They were just completely falling off, and Dana Holgorsen had said as much. So it's exactly it. And you look at the UCF collapse in the second half against Baylor. Partially, I would still attribute a lot of that to just getting complacent and being in control of the game so much that you take your foot off the gas, and then you're a little bit shell-shocked when all of a sudden you have to try and flip that switch back on, and it had kind of been turned off. But some of that, too, is going to be not having as much depth, and not being able to withstand a Baylor comeback like that. So you're right. You're just going to see that throughout the year, and it will take time. Even as UCF, I think, has talent composite-wise the most talented roster of any of these schools coming in, it will still take time to continue building up the depth. And UCF is well on their way with that recruiting class that they have coming up this year, by the way. But it will take some time, and it's been, I'm sure, a humbling experience for a lot of these fans. DW2CB, Mike equals the Gundertaker. Ooh, okay. I like that. I brought up Mike Gundy as the Undertaker meme popping back up the second you think he's dead and buried. The Gundertaker is a good name. That's solid stuff, DW2CB. I like that a lot. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. If you don't mind, I may start using that. I'll try to credit you, DW2CB, with the Gundertaker. Neilio, what's going on, Neilio? Appreciate you, man. Thank you for being here. Neilio says, good evening, John. Great show as usual. Hard to not be tremendously excited for the emergence of Avery last night for the rest of 23 and his extremely bright future as our QB. Thank you. Yeah, there's no doubt, man. There's no doubt. I'm not going to lie. I mean, now I experience the emotions of being a fan much more these days that I don't really have to put a governor on it because I'm not in press boxes and professionally working in it like I was before. So, the downs can be low and the highs can be pretty high. But I was down thinking like, man, I mean, they're not even playing Avery right now. And Will is really struggling. And then you're going to have this decision at the end of the year where like Will Howard still has a year of eligibility left technically. But Avery, you can just see the talent oozing out of him. And you feel like you're probably going to need to turn things over to him next year. And that could get a little tricky. And now it's like, hey, I mean, the way this is playing out, it starts to almost solve that for you a little bit. But I would, again, caution against absolutism here. Well, first of all, another thing that I hate to see some on social media is like people really running down Will. And it's like, look, man, the guy won a Big 12 championship last year, was clearly the better quarterback in the situation last year to win that league title. There have only been 3 guys that have done that since K-State's been in the Big 12 here. Like, let's not crush the guy too hard. And he was also a great teammate on the sideline while all this was going down with Avery. So I really hate to see that. But I would also say, like, I think K-State will need Will Howard to win games the rest of the year. There will be situations where they're going to need him. So let's not just completely, speaking of burying people, let's not completely bury Will Howard here. And I know that you're not. But yes, the way that it started to play out, it's like, man, if Avery keeps doing this and he's going to be the guy or partially the guy the rest of the year and continue to grow and develop, like, who baby? Sky's the limit. Sky's the limit for him, because I know everyone's going to look at 5 rushing touchdowns and think, this is just K-State stuff again, like Colin Klein ramming him into the line of scrimmage 30 times a game and pulling up 5 touchdowns. Avery's great. He can do that. But this dude can also sling the rock, man. If you go look at his high school highlights, like, he can sling it. He's got an arm. And even at times in the game, you saw it. Layered throw to Jace Brown was just tremendous. So, yeah, all sorts of potential that he just oozes. I cannot wait to see how the rest of his career plays out. Isaiah, what's up, Isaiah? Isaiah, Houston making a bowl game. Go Cougs. All right, let's pull up the Houston schedule. Here. My gut reaction is to say I doubt it, because, again, we've just seen such a depth problem for Houston in the second half of games here. But they need 3 more, so you're 3-3. Texas this week. I don't think you're beating Texas. I'm sorry, Houston. I would love to see it. Would love to come on here and be wrong about that, but I don't see that. Winning at K-State, I have a difficult time seeing Houston going on the road and doing that, but perhaps if K-State is like coming off of a big win, emotional high against TCU, you could catch them off guard a little bit there. At Baylor now is going to be winnable. Against Cincinnati at home is definitely going to be winnable. Oklahoma State at home, oh boy, looking pretty tough right now. At UCF, yeah, maybe winnable. I don't know. That'll be what UCF and Houston are by November 25th. Will be pretty intriguing to see how they're holding on at that point. Speaking again of depth and how you make it through a season. So I think you got to squint. I think you got to squint if you're going to see a bowl game for Houston there. I'll be honest, Isaiah, but you've given yourself a chance with the Hail Mary and the win, and I certainly don't want to take away any of your shine or excitement based on what just happened on Thursday. Enjoy the win. Enjoy the win, my friend. Don't let me suck any joy out of that. So anyway, I think that is going to about wrap it up for me here. I appreciate all of you guys that have hung out here tonight on the chat. Lively bunch tonight. It's a fun one. We had some good info to chew on here. Please like the video on your way out the door. If you don't mind, very easy way, free way to support the channel. Leave a comment in the comment section too, underneath the video, whether you agree or disagree. All of that stuff really helps. I would much appreciate it if you did that. You can contribute to the channel on Venmo at John-Kurtz-4 if you did not watch this live. If you want to support the work that I'm doing to bring you Big 12 and conference realignment content on a week in, week out basis, that is always much appreciated as well. And spread the word. Tell your friends, whether it's in person, word of mouth, or on social media, Instagram, Twitter, Threads, Facebook, wherever it is that you're hanging out with Big 12 fans and fans of your school. Let them know about the channel, and let's continue to grow this community that we have here. Sincerely appreciate all of you guys for being here. Fun chat tonight. Oregon Ute is going to close us off. You know what? I like this comment so much. Oregon Ute closes us off. Kurtz doesn't suck. Thank you, Oregon Ute. Thank you. And with that, I bid you all adieu. Have a great rest of your Sunday evening, a great start to your week, and I will talk to you all soon.